जय कुंज विहारी। जय राधा माधव जय कुंज विहारी। जय गोपी जन वल्लभा जय गिरिवरधारी। यशोदनंदन व्रज जनरंजना यशोदनंदन व्रज जनरंजना। यमुना तीरावनचारी। जय राधा माधव जय कुंज विहारी। जय राधा माधव जय कुंज विहारी। जय कुंज विहारी। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवतसेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकीनन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिधि नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone for the morning Bhagavatam class. Reading from Canto 2nd, Chapter 7, entitled Scheduled Incarnations, verse number 53. Mayam varnayato mushya Ishwarasyanumodita Srinvata Shraddhaya Nityam Mayayatmanamuhyati. Mayam varnayato mushya Ishwarasyanumodataha Srinvata Shraddhaya Nityam Mayayatmanamuhyati. Mayam varnayato mushya Ishwarasyanumodataha Srinvata Shraddhaya Nityam माययात्मानमुह्यति ईश्वरस्यानुमोदितः शृण्वता श्रद्धया नित्यम् माययात्मानमुह्यति मायां वर्णयतो मुष्या ईश्वरस्यानुमोदतः शृण्वता श्रद्धया नित्यम् माययात्मानमुह्यति मायां वर्णयतो मुष्या ईश्वरस्यानुमोदतः शृण्वता श्रद्धया नित्यम् माययात्मानमुह्यति मायां वर्णयतो मुष्या ईश्वरस्यानुमोदतः शृण्वता श्रद्धया नित्यम् माययात्मानमुह्यति माताजी मायां वर्णयतो मुष्या ईश्वरस्यानुमोदतः शृण्वता श्रद्धया नित्यम् माययात्मानमुह्यति. Word to word. Mayam, affairs of external energy. Varnayataha, while describing. Amusya, of the Lord. Ishwarasya, of the personality of Godhead. Anumodataha, thus appreciating. Shrunvataha, thus hearing. Shraddhaya, with devotion. Nityam, regularly. Mayaya, by the illusory energy. Atma, the living entity. Na, never. Muhyati, becomes illusioned. Translation purport by Srila Prabhupada. Translation. The Lord's activities in association with his different energies should be described, appreciated, and heard in accordance with the teachings of the Supreme Lord. If this is done regularly with devotion and respect, one is sure to get out of the illusory energy of the Lord. Purport. The science of learning a subject matter seriously is different from the sentiments of fanatics. Fanatics or fools may consider the Lord's activities in relation with the external energy to be useless for them, and they may falsely claim to be higher participants in the internal energy of the Lord. But factually, the Lord's activities in relation with the external energy and the internal energy are equally good. On the other hand, those who are not completely free from the clutches of Lord's external energy should devotedly hear regularly about the activities of the Lord in relation with the external energy. They should not foolishly jump up to the activities of the internal energy, falsely attracted with the Lord's internal potential activities like his Rasa Leela. The cheap reciters of Bhagavatam are very much enthusiastic about the Lord's internal potential activities, and the pseudo-devotees absorbed in material sense enjoyment falsely jump to the stage of liberated souls and thus fall down deeply into the clutches of external energy. Some of them think that to hear about the pastimes of the Lord means to hear about his activities with the gopis or about his pastimes like lifting the Govardhan hill, and they have nothing to do with the Lord's plenary expansions as the Purushavatara and their pastimes in the creation, maintenance or annihilation of the material world. But a pure devotee knows that there is no difference between the pastimes of the Lord, either in the Rasa Leela or in creation, maintenance, or destruction of the material world. Rather, the description of such activities of the Lord as Purushavasaras are specifically meant for persons who are in the clutches of external energy. Topics like Rasa Leela are meant for the liberated souls and not for the conditioned souls. The conditioned souls, therefore, must hear with appreciation and devotion the Lord's pastimes in relation with the external energy, and such acts are as good as hearing of Rasa Leela in liberated stage. A conditioned soul should not imitate the activities of the liberated souls. Lord Sri Chaitanya never indulged in hearing the Rasa Leela with ordinary men. In Srimad Bhagavatam, the signs of God, the first 9 cantos, prepare the ground for hearing the 10th canto. This will be further explained in the last chapter of this canto. The 3rd canto, it will be more explicit. A pure devotee of the Lord, therefore, must begin reading or hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from the very beginning and not from the 10th canto. We have several times been requested by the so-called devotees to take up the 10th canto immediately, but here we have refrained from such an action because we wish to present Srimad Bhagavatam as a science of Godhead and not as a sensuous understanding of the conditioned souls. This is forbidden by such authorities as Sri Brahmaji. By reading and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam as a scientific presentation, the conditioned souls will gradually be promoted to the higher status of transcendental knowledge after being freed from the illusory energy based on sense enjoyment. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport for the 2nd canto, 7th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam entitled Scheduled Incarnations with Specific Functions. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone for today's morning Bhagavatam class. Today we are on the last verse of this chapter. The discussion between Narada and Brahmaji was going on all these days. So before, I'll just sort of summarize a little bit at what point we are, because this is the last verse anyway. So the Bhagavatam 2nd canto starts with Parikshit Maharaj's question. In the first canto end, Parikshit Maharaj asked a question, what a conditioned soul should do in general and what a person who is about to die should do. And Shukadeva Goswami was very much happy by just hearing the question. And he just tells one should constantly hear about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Tasmat Bharata Sarvatma Bhagavan Ishvaro Harihi Shrotavya Kirtitavyasya Smartavyasya Ichchatam Abhayam. So in this material world, one is going through Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi, there is constant fear that which is there. And somebody who is desiring fearlessness, what he should do? He should hear about the Supreme Lord. Srotavya, Kirtitavya and Smartavya. One should hear, one should speak, and one should constantly meditate on the activities of the Lord. And while giving that also, Shukadeva Goswami gives three, he takes the Lord by three names. Sarvatmana, Bhagavan and Ishvara. Sarvatmana is the super soul in everybody's heart. Bhagavan is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is doing pastimes with his pure devotees. And Ishvara is the controller of everyone. So one should hear the pastimes of the Lord in these three relationships. That's what Shukadeva Goswami, at the very beginning, he has mentioned to the Parikshit Maharaj. And it goes on, and just by giving one direct answer is not sufficient. And Shukadeva Goswami takes 2 chapters and he defeats all other philosophies. The Karmavad, the Jnanavad, the various Ashtanga Yoga process. He takes up all the processes and he says the hearing of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the best. And at the end of, towards the 3rd chapter, he almost finishes his presentation. And now Shukadeva Goswami has told one should hear. And he has concluded his presentation. And now Parikshit Maharaj starts asking questions because he wants to hear. And that's what Shukadeva Goswami also told, one should hear. And Parikshit Maharaj starts asking questions not about the internal pastimes of the Lord, not about what did Krishna do in Vrindavan, not that. The Parikshit Maharaj starts asking questions about how did Lord create this whole universe? How did the creation takes place? How is he maintaining and where it is completely dissolving? So the 4th chapter starting, Parikshit Maharaj asked this question. And now Shukadeva Goswami is actually beginning to answer and speak the Bhagavatam. So that's where he offers the Mangalacharana prayers. So the 1st chapter, there are no prayers. The prayers are there in the 4th chapter. So before speaking the Bhagavatam, Shukadeva Goswami, he prays to the Supreme Lord, he glorifies the Supreme Lord, and then he begs to empower him. And then he says, the same questions that you are asking about the creation, how the Lord has created, how he is maintaining, is also asked by the Narada Muni to Brahmaji. And there, the Narada Brahma Samvad comes. So exactly it is very beginning of the Bhagavatam, and it is pertaining to the hearing of the Supreme Lord in relation to the material world. So Narada Muni goes to Brahmaji and asks 6 questions, from where this world has come, on what it is being resting, and at the end where it will get dissolved into, what it is being made up of, and all these questions he asks. And Brahmaji gives in whole detail, 5th chapter, 6th chapter, he gives how Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of all causes. And after speaking the answers to the Narada Muni, Brahmaji gives something more that Narada Muni has not asked. That is the pastimes of the Supreme Lord. All the incarnations that Supreme Lord has taken, he just summarizes in just one verse. And for Sri Krishna, he takes 10 verses to describing the pastimes. So Brahmaji has presented 2 things. One is how this whole creation is been taking place, or rather how Supreme Personality of Godhead is a cause of this creation. And then he says how Supreme Personality of Godhead takes various incarnations in this material world. So these 2 subject matters Brahmaji has presented, and this last 4 verses is like the summary of what all Brahmaji has presented. So we'll just see these 4 verses. and then we'll go ahead. So it starts with something like 50, 51, 52, and 53, these 4 verses. So Supreme Personality of Godhead says, Brahmaji says in the 50th verse, the Supreme Lord is the cause of all causes. The Sat, Asat, everything is coming from the Supreme Lord. And then the 51 is very interesting. 51 verse he says, Idam Bhagavatam Nama Yanme Bhagavatoditam. Idam Bhagavatam Nama. This is Bhagavatam. This is the signs of Godhead, the Prabhupada writes. So what Brahmaji has presented, the description of the Purushavasaras, the creation and the pastimes. This entire thing is called as Bhagavatam. So why it is called as Bhagavatam? Because everything is being connected to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then he says, Yanme Bhagavatoditam. This has been personally given to me by Lord himself. Sangrahoyam yan vibhutinam. It was spoke as an accumulation of his divine potencies. So this Bhagavatam itself is a potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we know that Bhagavatam has arisen as the incarnation to give the direction to the misdirected civilization of this Kali Yuga. And also Bhagavatam contains a lot of pastimes and various activities of the Lord. So Bhagavatam is not just the stories of Krishna, it is not just the stories of various incarnations, but it is also the relationship of this material world with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then Brahmaji asks Narada Muni to take this knowledge and spread it and distribute it. So Gauravilas Prabhu also very nicely spoken about this particular verse, and he has elaborated very much on the Guru Parampara and how each person has been taking up this activity. But I'll just want to speak a few little bit. So in the Vedas it is said the living entity has 5 kinds of runa. So one of that is Rishi runa. We hear from our sages, from the teachers. So in the modern schools, they take fees for whatever they are teaching. But the Rishis, they don't take any fees for whatever they are giving. So how do we repay to that particular knowledge that we are receiving? The concept of Rishi Runa, it just says that you first learn the scriptures that which are been given and then try to present and give to the next generation. So that is the way how we repay to the debt that we are getting. Of course, specifically coming to this particular spiritual knowledge that we are getting, Prabhu Maharaj says, somebody who even thinks that he can repay debt to the Guru, he will be a joker. So that aspect is there. But the whole point is, person is expected to take up to spreading of the knowledge in whatever way he can. And then the next comes is 52nd verse. 52nd verse, Brahmaji speaks with what mood the Bhagavatam has to be spoken. Yata haro bhagavati nrinam bhaktir bhavishyati. So, when one is speaking Bhagavatam, the mood should be that the listener should get devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Bhagavatam contains various topics. There are the topics of planetary system, there are the topics on the movement of the sun, there are topics on Varnashram, there are topics of various ninth canto has a lot of stories of various kings. But the whole purpose of Bhagavatam, of speaking of Bhagavatam, is Nrinam Bhaktir Bhavishyati. The person should get the devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So if one is speaking Bhagavatam and it is getting diverted, then the person is getting, is losing the track of for which the Bhagavatam is supposed to be spoken. And then this last verse of this chapter, here Brahmaji is clarifying. So when we are speaking about Supreme Lord, why not just speak about the internal pastimes? Why to speak about the external pastimes? Why to speak about the creation, maintenance and all? Somebody may have that question. So Brahmaji is clarifying. Mayam varnayato amushya ishwarasya anumodita shrunvata shraddhaya nityam mayayatma na muhyati. So somebody who is hearing to the pastimes of the Lord in relation to the Maya. So what happens? Mayayatma na muhyati. The living entity will not be illusioned by the, is not bewildered by the illusory potency of the Supreme Lord. So in this material world, everybody is suffering, being illusioned by the material energy. Lust, anger, greed, pride, envy, 6 anarthas, so much of confusion. What is the purpose of life? Everything will be clarified when one is hearing about the Maya, but in relationship to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we'll just see at various places where Bhagavatam has been spoken and whether this discussion of the material world is there in other places of Bhagavatam also. So So Bhagavatam was first spoken by the Supreme Lord himself to Brahmaji. So at the very beginning of the creation. So Brahmaji did lot of tapasya and then he got the darshan of Supreme Lord and he asked few questions. What is your form? How do I understand it? How do you interact with your various energies? And of course the subject will come in more detail in 9th chapter. But the whole point was, the Brahmaji is asking, how do you interact with your energies? And then the Supreme Lord gives the Bhagavatam in 4 seed verses, where he mentions how he is interacting with his internal potency and how he is interacting with his external potency also. So the interaction with the external potency is also the part of the original Bhagavatam 4 verses, that which is given by the Brahmaji, Supreme Lord himself. And then we have this section where Brahmaji is giving the knowledge to Narada, and very much the creation is a part of it. And then the next Bhagavatam was, the next in the Guru Parampara it comes is, Narada Muni is speaking to Vyasadeva. There also, yesterday, Din Gauram Prabhu very wonderfully went through a lot of verses and presented. But I just take few points from the Narada Vyasa Samvad. So, in the discussion of Narada and Vyasa, Narada Muni does not give the whole description of how Supreme Lord is doing pastimes, so that the pastimes are not there. Narada Muni is not even explaining how Lord is dealing with the material energy. Because he says, the Vyasadeva, he is already well versed with all the pastimes of the Lord. But while presenting all the scriptures, Vyasadeva did one small mistake. That is, he has not glorified sufficiently the Supreme Personality of Godhead as much as he has glorified Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. So that's where in Narada Vyasa Samvad, Narada Muni, rather presenting whole Bhagavatam, Narada Muni is just clarifying the purpose for which the Bhagavatam has to be presented. So one verse comes very nicely. Tato anyata kinchit yat vivakshataha pratak dishastat krita rupa namabhi nakarshicit kwapi cha dustitamati labheta vata hatanau rivaspadam. Whatever you desire to describe that is separate in vision from the Lord simply reacts with different forms and agitates the mind as a wind agitates a boat which has no resting place. So basically Narada Muni is saying that if you are not speaking about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or rather if you are not connecting the topics to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and if you are just describing them, what happens? The mind which is already conditioned, it starts agitating. So suppose he gives an example of a boat which does not have any resting place. Suppose the boat is there on the harbor and there is no anchor. It is just staying. So what will happen? After some time, with the wind, the boat will just move here and there, because there is no fixed place for the boat. So similarly, Narada Muni says here, so when you are describing various activities, various topics, without connection to the Supreme Lord, what happens? The mind of the conditioned soul will just deviate here and there, and it will not do any benefit to the conditioned soul. And then he says, the conditioned soul is already very much attracted to doing sense gratification. And you are given lot of topics how to do sense gratification, but you are also given what are the recommendations and what are the restrictions. So Narada Muni says, conditioned soul will take only the recommendations, but they will not take out the restrictions. Dharma iti rata. They will accept this as dharma, and they will very conveniently leave away the restrictions. So that's what happens when the topics of the Supreme Lord is not sufficiently presented, and when it is not sufficiently connected to the various topics. So now somebody may ask, like, is Bhagavatam completely against speaking material activities? So Narada Muni also clarifies over there. In the next verses he speaks, idam hi pumsha tapasa srutasya va swishtasya suktasya cha buddhi dattayo avichitordham kavibir nirupito yaduttama shloka gunanu varnanam. The learned circles have positively concluded that the infallible purpose of advancement of knowledge, austerity, study of the Vedas, sacrifices, chanting of hymns, charity, culminates in the transcendental description of the Lord. So in the Narada Muni has mentioned sacrifices, studying of the Vedas, chanting of the hymns, and in the purport, Prabhupada takes that even more ahead and presents in a very relatable terms for us. And he says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead should be described by whatever means that we have. The matter of art, science, philosophy, physics, chemistry, psychology, all branches of knowledge should be wholly and solely applied in the service of the Supreme Lord. So everything the material world that which is presenting, the person is expected to do in this material world, that a person can do, or the person has to do in relationship to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, relating to the Ishopanishad is from the Upanishads, and it gives all confusing terms. So verse number 9, 10 and 11 speaks about Vidya and Avidya. So verse number 9 says, somebody who is doing Avidya, he will go to hell. Somebody who is involved in Vidya, he will go to even darker hell. So like that he presents about the Vidya and Avidya. In the verse number 11, the Ishopanishad says, what one should do? One should take Vidya or one should take Avidya, knowledge and ignorance. So basically, the topics of the Supreme Lord, somebody can see the topics of this material world is Avidya, because at the end of the day, this is temporary. So here, the verse is, Vidyamcha avidyamcha estat veda ubayam saha. So only one who can learn the process of nescience, that is ignorance, and that of the transcendental knowledge, side by side, can transcend the influence of the repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. Avidyaya mrutyum tirtva. So by avidya, so one transcends this material world, and by vidya, one reaches the supreme absolute truth. So Prabhupada in the purport very nicely writes, there is no question of stopping activities, because at the end of the day, we are in this material world, encaged by this body, which is made up of the 24 elements, mind, body, intelligence, we do have. We cannot just say, I'll only engage in the transcendental service of the Supreme Lord. So what the Vedas they give is a balanced approach between this material activities and the spiritual activities. The Prabhupada writes, the great sages and saints of India have attempted to do this by the balanced program of spiritual and material knowledge. They never allow the misuse of human intelligence and degrade to sense gratification. So, brothers, culture of spiritual knowledge necessitates the help of body and mind. Therefore, maintenance of the body and mind is required if we are to reach our goal. So, material activities we cannot completely give up because we are in the material body. And when we take up only to the material activities, there is a full-fledged chance of getting completely deviated, like the boat which is deviates by small wind. So Bhagavatam presents the solution is all the material activities also should be done or should be related to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then, so going ahead, so like that, Narada Muni does not reject Vyasadeva's teachings of other scriptures and all, but he just mentions where his purpose is being lost. So Bhagavatam is like a torchlight which is giving the light. So it is also gives light in what mood, in what sense the other scriptures have to be read also. They should be read in perfect glorification of the Supreme Lord. So now coming in the next parampara, the Sukadeva and Vyasa are there. Sukadeva Goswami learns from Vyasadeva. So now we don't have a description of what questions Sukadeva Goswami asked to Vyasadeva and how it all happened. But Sukadeva Goswami mentions why he started reading or learning Bhagavatam. He says, the transcendentalists who are above the regulative principles and restrictions take pleasure in describing the glories of the Lord. So it says, even the transcendentalists who are completely above the material activities also, they get attracted by the pastimes of the Lord. So we know just one of the, how Sukadeva Goswami came, it has been said that Sukadeva Goswami was doing tapasya, doing meditation, and then he hears a shloka, Aho Bakiyam Sanakala Kutam, how Krishna was so merciful that he has given the position of mother to somebody who has come to kill him. So he has started wondering who is this personality, and he has got attracted and he has come. So there also we see that the Lord's activities in this world, how he is killing the demons and how he is showing his mercy, that which is there. And the next is Parikshit Maharaj to Sukadeva Goswami, the whole description that we have seen initially also. Parikshit Maharaj is asking the questions of how the Lord is doing various pastimes with this creation, maintenance and destruction. So, Prabhupada, in one of the purports, he writes very nicely, why one should hear the pastimes of the Lord in relation to the material world. Because the pastimes of Krishna in relation to the material world presents the greatness of the Supreme Lord. If you are only hearing the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan, Krishna is running around, Krishna is stealing the butter, Krishna is speaking some lies, Krishna is playing with some girls. So people will tell, this is what everybody else outside people are doing. But in sometimes Krishna will lift the Govardhan hill and Krishna will kill demons. But it is said that all these pastimes of killing demons, that is happening in the material world. Bhama Vrindavan. In Golaka Vrindavan, there is no need of killing the demons. And if somebody says, I will not hear the killing of the demon pastimes, I will only hear the sweet pastimes with gopis, then they will be in difficulty. So they will hear only sweetness but not the greatness. So here Prabhupada writes, only when one knows Lord Krishna's greatness can one firmly put one's unflinching faith in him. Otherwise, like the common man, even the great leaders of the men will mistake the Lord Krishna for one of the many demigods or a historical personality or a myth only. So, the hearing of the pastimes of the internal potency is for the pure devotees who is completely beyond the material world. For them they can do. But specifically for the conditioned soul, the first thing that we need to get is a firm faith on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. So one should surrender completely to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So how does that come? Unless one has firm faith in the Supreme Lord. The Krishna in the same shloka, he says, Sarvadharma parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja, aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha ishyami masucha. I will take care of all of your sins. Now if you see, Arjuna has seen Krishna showing Virat Rupa. In that Virat Rupa, he has killed Bhishma, Drona, Karna, everybody is entering into the mouth of Krishna. So after seeing that Virat Rupa, somebody can say, oh, this person really has potency and I can surrender to this person. Like suppose a person comes and says, it is said that a person is trying to cross the river by catching the tail of a dog. The dog itself cannot cross when it is a huge river. Somebody who is catching the tail will not able to cross. So when we are taking shelter of someone, we should have faith that this person has a lot of capacity to protect me. So that's the one of the main purpose. One, we should hear the greatness of the Lord. So just taken that faith in a person comes with two things. One is, does this person really has the potency to protect me? And secondly is, does this person have concern for me? There is a person who is completely competent to protect, but he is unconcerned, he is not willing to listen to our words, then also we are again in trouble. So Bhagavatam presents the various glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his potencies, and also it presents how the Lord extends himself to to help the conditioned souls. So Jayadeva Goswami, in his, he wrote Gita Govinda, which talks about very intimate pastimes of Krishna and Gopis. But in the very starting, as a Mangalacharan, he writes Dashavatara Stotra. He says, don't underestimate this personality. This is the same personality who has come as a Kurmadev and he has kept the whole huge Mandara mountain on his back. Such a huge Mandara mountain which the Devatas and demons, they could not lift. It was just lying on the Kurmadev and it was just scratching. It was just giving an itching, scratching to the itching sensation of the Kurmadev. It was not at all big trouble for him. So this same Lord is the Varahadev who has lifted the entire earth from the Garbhodak ocean. And this is the same Lord who has killed Hiranyakashipu. So somebody as powerful as Hiranyakashipu, who has got boons from Lord Brahma, and he is acting like a second Brahma, and he is changing the whole software of the material world, and somebody with whom every demigod is been afraid, and he has gotten a boon in such a way that everybody is completely confused. Is there any way this person can be killed? But Krishna has a way to even bypass all these boons and even to kill that person and protect his devotees. So when we hear all these pastimes, then we get faith that Krishna really has a lot of potency to do. And also there is a pastimes of Vamandev. So here Vamandev, the Bali Maharaj gets the blessings of Brahmanas. And now the Krishna has to circumvent the blessings of Brahmanas and then has to give all the kingdom to the Devatas. So he does that also through chala, cheating. So Supreme Lord can do cheating also. So during the Mandhara churning of the milk ocean, the entire pot of Amrita was being taken by the demons after the whole endeavor. And all the demigods are now confused. How are we going to get it? And Krishna comes as a Mohini Murti and just with sweet words, he just takes the whole pot of nectar. So Lord has various potencies, not just the strength. He has also beauty, he has knowledge, he has fame. So Bhagavatam goes on, presents how Lord is so powerful. He is worthy of taking shelter. Now the question is, If so such a powerful Lord, will he come and protect me, a small, tiny living entity in this material world? And here we come the example of Prahlad Maharaj, who is a small 5-year-old boy, and Narsingadev took incarnation for protecting him because Prahlad Maharaj called for him. A question like, he is a pure devotee, what about me? The Lord came for Gajendra, who is an animal. The Lord's name has protected Ajamil. So Ajamil has not even called the Supreme Lord. He has just taken the names of Narayan, and that too calling his son. So all these stories Bhagavatam constantly presents to give the faith to the conditioned souls that Krishna is worthy of taking shelter, and Krishna is ready to give protection to even a small, tiny, little entity if one is sincere in approaching the Supreme Lord. So that's why the description of this Lord's pastimes in relation to the material world is very important. And one more thing, So here Bhagavatam also is asking here, Brahmaji is saying, Mayam varnayato mushya ishwarasya anumodita. One should speak this as an appreciation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, yeah. So in this material world, every living entity has a tendency of doing sense gratification. So we are in this material world, we don't know whom this material world belongs to, and we just came here and we are just seeing lot of material things lying here and around, and the conditioned soul has a desire to enjoy, and he just says, perfect combination, I want the desire to enjoy, and there are the objects which are lying without any name tag. The person tends to just take it and starts enjoying. So here Bhagavatam comes and also gives the description, also presents whom does this material world belongs to. So while describing the Maya, the material nature in connection to the Supreme Lord, what Bhagavatam is also doing is, this material world is not meant for your enjoyment. It is the property of the Supreme Lord. Suppose sometimes we see an empty plot of land, and if there is an empty plot of land, anybody can come and make small hut over there and start using it. So generally the owner of the place, he just keeps a board. This belongs to so and so person. So Bhagavatam is doing that particular role. So just now in the second canto of Bhagavatam, we have heard the whole Virat Rupa. So in the whole Virat Rupa, what is there? The rivers are like the veins of the Supreme Lord. The mountains are like the bones of the Supreme Lord. The trees are the hairs on the Supreme Lord. So each and every aspect of this material world is spoken in relation to the Supreme Lord. So there are the various Varnas, Ashramas, the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras, they are also spoken in relation to the Supreme Lord. So Bhagavatam, like this, it just says, everything is not meant for your enjoyment, but it is meant for the enjoyment of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is one more aspect that Bhagavatam presents. Yeah. So just conclude here. Yeah. Fine. One more point. Sorry. So in the whole purport, Prabhupada minimum 3 to 4 times writes the science of learning the subject matter. Prabhupada again and again calls this Bhagavatam as a science. So what does the science mean? Science is, you go to a chemical laboratory, you take 2 chemical substances, you mix it and the third chemical is formed. You mix acid and base, the salts are formed. So now anybody who knows the process, he can do that and he can get the result. So that was the science specifically means. So when Prabhupada is writing science of learning the subject, or the science of Supreme Personality of Godhead, or the science of going back home, back to Godhead, it is that the Bhagavatam is presenting a way in which every person can go back home, back to Godhead. It is just presenting various means and ways by following which anybody can go back home, Godhead. The way a scientific process can be followed by anyone and he can get the same result. So when the bhakti is seen as a sentiment, somebody will say, I like Supreme Lord, so I take the names. When you go out and try to give book distribution also, people will say, oh, you are a devotee, you like to chant the holy name, so you are doing. I am not inclined to take shelter of Lord, so I am not interested, so I am not, I should not take this bhakti. So people think like that. Or people think that this bhakti is only for a certain kind of people who are chosen by the Lord, and this is not for everyone. So, but here Prabhupada is presenting that this is a science which every living entity can try out. The process is given in the Bhagavatam, and every living entity will get the same result, because the conditioned soul is the same. That is, Bhagavatam is speaking to the conditioned souls. So, with this, I end my presentation here. So, we have just seen little summary of the where we are coming here. Ultimately, the Brahmaji, at the end of his teachings to the Narada Muni, he is asking him to go out and preach, and the preaching has to be done in a way that the devotion to the Supreme Lord will be awakened in the audience. And why the Maya has to be described? Because by describing the Maya in relation to the Supreme Lord, the person comes out of the illusion. Yeah. Thank you for your patient listening. We'll just, if anybody have any questions or corrections.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Ras Gopal Prabhu, for such beautiful class. You so beautifully presented the finer points of the purport, highlighted them. One of my query here is, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that a conditioned soul, and like all of us, should first hear Lord's pastime with the external energy, rather than directly jumping to the internal potency, directly jumping to the 10th canto. However, we also see that Srila Prabhupada has given Krishna book to read to everyone, and we distribute it also everywhere. So how we can reconcile this?
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu. So Prabhupada here, in the purport, he himself is writing that one should not directly jump to the pastimes of the Lord in the 10th canto. And then Prabhupada himself has given the Krishna book, which is directly speaking to the pastimes of the 10th canto. So now in the purport also Prabhupada is writing, before reading the 10th canto, one should prepare oneself by reading the whole 9 cantos, so that the mood of the person, how one should take and hear the Supreme Lord, the pastimes of 10th canto will be perfectly established. So that is the necessity of reading the 10th canto. Here Prabhupada is also presenting. But when Prabhupada is giving Krishna book, one major anxiety that Prabhupada had was he may not live so long to write the purports for whole the Bhagavatam. So that is one of the reasons why Prabhupada beforehand itself he wrote the 10th canto purports, because the ultimate essence is one should come to the Krishna, and if Prabhupada gives only halfway around and gives it, it will be very difficult. So Prabhupada, understanding that he may not stay long to write the whole purports, he has written Krishna book. And as we know, Prabhupada has only given purpose till the 13th chapter of Bhagavatam, 13th chapter of 10th canto of Bhagavatam. So, but while Prabhupada is presenting Krishna book, he again and again interrupts the flow of the presentation of the 10th canto and presents the main philosophy. The wherever Krishna comes, he writes Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The main philosophy of we are the conditioned soul suffering in this material world, and we are supposed to take shelter of the Krishna and to do devotional service. So these major aspects Prabhupada presents in his Krishna book. So Krishna book is not just a simple translations of 10th canto, but Prabhupada is also, wherever needed, he is elaborating whatever is needed, even though that is not a part of 10th canto. And whatever Prabhupada feels is too much, he just condenses. So like that, Prabhupada has taken care of that aspect. So because Prabhupada, with that mood, he has presented the Supreme 10th canto, we can take advantage of that 10th canto, Krishna book, and then read the pastimes of Krishna also. Thank you, Prabhu. So we'll stop here. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Shri Prabhupada ki.